Hi, I'm Jason Hudson from Tenzig Technology, and today we'll be showing you how to set up an HP Anyware Trust Center in conjunction with Tenzig Manager to allow you to connect and administer your Tenzig Trusted Zero clients. The Trust Center is the security and policy engine for the Trusted Zero client, and since it doesn't have a graphical user interface, an Endpoint Manager is used in conjunction with the Trust Center. The Tenzig Manager uses API calls to communicate with the Trust Center and configure and maintain the Trusted Zero client. Additionally, using a certificate authority, the Trust Center attests each Zero client is using HP's CA, or birth certificate, while the Trusted Zero client also validates the Trust Center is issued by HP. Before we continue, please just take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Tenzig YouTube channel. Your support enables us to reach a wider audience and continue providing valuable information to the tech community. For this demonstration, we'll need to cater for several pieces of infrastructure to be built and configured. A Rocky Linux server will be using version 9.5 from the DVD ISO download, and this will be hosting our Anyware Trust Center that we'll be installing in just a few minutes. We'll be running this on a virtual machine and take you through VM-specific settings at the time of installation. And we'll also be using a separate virtual machine to host our Tenzig Manager server and the Tenzig Trust Center connector. The Tenzig Trust Center connector serves as the gateway between our Anyware Trust Center, our Tenzig Manager server, and our Trusted Zero clients. Again, we'll take you through the installation process from start to finish during the demo. We also need to make changes to our DNS so that we have a subdomain set up containing several host A records that point directly to our own Anyware Trust Center on the Rocky Linux server. In this section, we're going to create a base subdomain that contains 4 A records that will all point to our Trust Center Linux server. Our subdomain will sit just below the top level domain and is called jh-trust-center. The 4A records should then be created inside there and have the following names as shown: API, Endpoint-Connector, OTA, and finally Register. When you create them, you need to give them all the same IP address as your Trust Center server IP address. Once that has been completed, you can come out of the DNS setup. In this section, we'll take you through downloading and installing a Rocky Linux server on a virtual machine, ready for installation of the Trust Center server. To start with, you need to head over to the Rocky Linux website at rockylinux.org/download to get a copy of the Linux installer. You can use any of the ISO installers, but if you want a Linux OS with an already installed GUI environment, then click on the DVD ISO option. Once we have the ISO downloaded, we're going to head over to vSphere and build a new virtual machine. When doing this, you just need to make sure that your machine has the following requirements in place: 4 vCPUs, 16 gig of RAM, and 120 gig plus of disk space. When it comes to disk space, 80 gig plus of space is required on the /var partition for persistent volumes. Also, you need to allocate all disk space. Do not thin provision the disk. Just before we boot the VM, we need to point it to the Linux ISO, so it will boot from that and start the installer process. Once we've found it, we can then click Finish and the machine will build. Once built, we can start to boot the VM and open up a web console to complete the rest of the installation process. Now, we just need to select the Install Rocky Linux 9.5 to kickstart the install. Once the OS installer starts to boot, the first thing to do is set the language preferences and click Continue. Now, under the System heading, click Installation Destination and you'll be taken to the device selection screen. Click the drive to select it and then click the Custom Storage Configuration option and then click Done. Next, we need to click the link to create mount points automatically. In the case of Rocky Linux, creating a VM with 120 gig of space does not typically generate a partition with the required 80 gig in the root, and the home partition is generally larger than necessary. It's recommended to remove the home partition altogether during installation and allocate all disk space to the root partition. This will allow enough free space for the /var partition. So, we're going to delete the home partition and then add the 41 gig of free space to the existing root. So we have approximately 111 gig in the root. Once we're happy, we click Done and then Accept Changes. The last thing we need to do is set a root password for this machine. And once we've done that, just click Begin Installation. For the purpose of time, we're moving the video on until we see the complete status. And once complete, we click Reboot System. Once the Linux server has rebooted, we need to do two things to the machine before installing the Trust Center server. We need to set the IP address to be manual, to match that of the DNS subdomain A records we created earlier on, and also set the hostname of the machine. Go into the main settings at the top right of the desktop and click on the wired connection settings. Click IPv4 and then tick the manual method. Enter in the IP address of the server so that it matches the DNS entries, and then also complete the DNS addresses of your own DNS servers. Click Apply once these have been completed, and then just click the toggle so you disconnect and then connect the network adapter again for the settings to take effect. Now, to change the hostname, just scroll down and click the About link, and then click on the local host device name and change it to match the DNS subdomain that you configured earlier when setting up the 4A records. Close the settings menu when that's been done. Once you've done that, click on the Activities button in the top left and then click the terminal icon to open the terminal window. We need to make sure that the hostname change is static, so type in hostname CTL and press Enter. And you should see that the static hostname is the one we just created. Now, we're going to open up a browser on the Linux server so we can create and download the Trust Center scripts that will ultimately download and build the Trust Center server application. So, click on the Activities icon again, and this time click to open the Firefox browser. If you navigate to anywhere.hp.com, click on the Products drop-down, and then Anywhere Trusted Endpoints. You'll see a link to the Anywhere Trust Center at the bottom of the page, but we just need to log in first before we can gain access to the installer scripts. To get hold of your support account login, you need to register your Anywhere Trust Center subscription first. You can do this by clicking the link, filling out the online form, and then submitting your registration. Let's just go back and click Login. If you don't already have an account, just click Create an Account and you can fill out your details and then ultimately verify this with your registered subscription to gain access to the script download section in a moment. We already have an account, so if we go back, then we can sign in. Now, if we click on the Anywhere Trust Center link, we can see a Downloads and Scripts link appear. Click this and agree to the End User License Agreement, and you should see a box that allows you to type in the subdomain that you created earlier. As you start typing this in, you should see the list of your A records populated below. This is just letting you know that these should be created before you get the installation script and run it. Now that's done, just click the Get Installation Script button and your installer script will appear above. One thing to note is that this script is valid for 1 hour from creation, so if you don't apply it during that time, you'll have to generate it again. Now, just click the copy button next to the script and then move over to the terminal window. We're just going to create a subdirectory and change to it so that we can run the installer inside there, just so everything doesn't end up in the root. Now, paste in the script you copied a few moments earlier and press enter to start the installation process. Again, for the purpose of the video, we'll move this installation process forward until it completes successfully. Now that it's complete, if you want to check that everything was installed successfully, you can run the command sudo trust-center-ctl space diagnose, and you should see something like this displayed on the screen. This all looks good, so that's the Trust Center server installed and running. Great job! Before we look at installing the Tenzing Manager server, we'll just show you how to locate your TC admin password that we'll need during the Trust Center connector setup in just a while. Type in the command cat space config.yaml and you should see the password listed below, under the username of TC admin that we'll be using in the next section. In this section, we'll guide you through installing the Tenzing Manager server that includes the Trust Center connector. To grab a copy of the Tenzing Manager installer, just head over to the Tenzing website at www.tenzing.com, click the Solutions and then Tenzing Manager link, and click the Secure Your Free Manager download link to register and download the installer. Now, let's continue and start the installation. When the welcome message appears, click Next, and then click I agree to the end user license agreement. Tick the TC connector box and click Next. Click Install, and a few moments later when the Secure Connector Setup dialog appears, just click Next. When the Secure Connector Setup is completed, click Next again, and when prompted, click Next and then Install to start the Tenzing Manager web console installation. Once this is installed, click Next again, and you'll see the Trust Center connector setup dialog. Now, inside the Trust Center host, you need to type in the full name of the A record that starts with API as shown here, and then click Next. In the previous chapter, we showed you how to identify the TC admin user's password on our Trust Center server from inside the config.yaml file. You need to supply this password here inside the initial password field, and then below create a new password for the Trust Center connection. So type in a new connection password in the password field and then repeat this to confirm it. Click Next once this has been done. Click Next again and just wait for the installation to continue for a few moments. Now, the Tenzing Manager settings screen will be displayed where you need to set up a network share that Tenzing Manager will use for its thin client image backups, recovery and various other settings. Type in the path of the folder you'd like to use along with authorized credentials and click Test. If the share doesn't exist, you'll be asked if you want to create it. Again, if the folder you specified doesn't exist, you'll be asked if you want to create this also. Click OK, and the path and credentials will be validated. And then once the dialog comes back, and we're asked if we want a DNS service record to be added, we're going to click No on this occasion, as this setting is only applicable to Tenzing Thin and Zero clients, and not relevant for Trusted Zero clients. Then when the Windows Firewall settings appear, click Yes to accept the changes. A few moments later, when the installation shows as completed, click Next and then Finish, and you'll see the Tenzing Manager service starting. Before we take a look at the Manager web console, we need to open the Tenzing Manager settings and modify one of the options inside there. Once inside, click on the Discovery tab and then untick Enable Automatic Discovery, as this isn't used for discovery of our Trusted Zero clients and only applies to modernised Tenzing Thin and Zero clients. Once you've done that, save the changes by clicking OK and then click Yes when asked to restart the manager server. Now that's finished, let's launch the Tenzig Manager web console and take a look inside. Once the console is loaded, let's create a thin client group for our Trusted Zero client, so that it gets populated once the client checks in. Right-click on the thin clients group, select New, and then Group. Give it a meaningful name, and then click the Auto Population filter, called Filter by Platform, and then Trusted Zero Client, and click OK. Now that we've done that, let's just boot the Tenzig V2200 Trusted Zero client. When the client boots for the first time, we just need to configure the language settings, and when prompted, type in the FQDN details of the Register A record that we created earlier, and click Connect. This method shows you how to register the Trusted Zero client manually. However, the most efficient way to do this en masse is to create a CNAME record inside your DNS that allows for automatic discovery of your Trusted Zero clients. Just create the CNAME record inside the Trust Center subdomain with the alias of Anywhere Trust Center, and then point this to the FQDN that matches the register.trustcenter as shown here. Using this method, your devices will now automatically register themselves once they start up. Now, if we go into the health settings in the top right, we can see the device is connected to our Trust Center successfully. And if we head back to the Tenzig Manager console, we can see the client has appeared inside the newly created group. Before we wrap up, we'll mention a possible setup scenario for your Tenzig Manager and Trust Center environments, where you might want to have a single Tenzig Manager instance, but also have several Trust Center servers managing separate groups of Trusted Zero clients. This can be done by installing your Tenzig Manager server on a dedicated virtual machine, and then installing the Trust Center connector on more than one separate VM. These separate Trust Center connectors can then be set up to point back to the single Tenzig Manager instance by using the same manager server host address and the Tenzig Manager server's relay code as shown here inside the Tenzig Manager settings screen. The Trust Center connectors could then be set up to point to individual Anywhere Trust Center servers via their own DNS subdomain A records, so they can service their own groups of Trusted Zero clients. This concludes today's presentation on creating a Zero Trust framework with Anywhere Trust Center and Tenzig Manager to allow you to connect and manage your Tenzig Trusted Zero clients. We showed you how to modify your DNS to add in 4A records required by the Trust Center server. Then we showed you how to download the Rocky Linux ISO and then run this installer on a virtual machine, and then took you through some of the specifics to configure the Rocky OS. We then explained how to log into the Anywhere Trust Center portal and gain access to a specific installer script, and showed you how to run this to build your own Trust Center server environment. Then we showed you how to install the Tenzig Manager server and specifically set up the Tenzig Trust Center connector to integrate with the previously set up Trust Center server. And then, to finish off, we showed you how to register the Tenzig V2200 Trusted Zero client with the Trust Center and what it looked like from within the Tenzig Manager web console. If you enjoyed the video and found the content helpful, please take a moment to like it and also subscribe to the Tenzig YouTube channel. Your support enables us to reach a wider audience and continue providing valuable information to the tech community. Remember, if you have any questions regarding this or related topics, then please contact your Tenzig team or visit the website at www.tenzig.com. From all of us here at Tenzig, thanks for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.